Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of Life Lessons in Combat Sports. I'm your host, as usual, Eric Hamidi, here with another episode. And it's kind of funny how sometimes the timing of these episodes plays out because very recently here in LA, it rained. And the last episode I did, I was talking about how Max Holloway he had that line of without the rain, there would never be a rainbow. And it's kind of funny how it sort of played out this way in that this is a couple days after it rains. So I don't know. And I guess also I was looking at a story that somebody had on Facebook that actually included a clip of the thing that I'm going to talk about in this episode. So it's just interesting how the timing works out in all these. And sometimes it's just funny how these things work out, or it's interesting how these things kind of play out. So once again, I'm going to be talking about an MMA fighter by the name of Khabib Nurmagomedov. And what I'm going to concentrate on is something that he mentioned in his last fight, and a little bit of I guess really important words to live by or to act on. And I guess I'm saying all this because one thing that I want to make clear is that I never really want to be in a situation where I'm glorifying people who have been involved in controversies or scandals or just work with terrible people. And with Khabib, this might be one of those, this is one of those situations where there are certain controversies that he's involved with or that he's participated in or that he's done. And by me sharing the topic of this episode, I'm not saying that necessarily this is a good person. It's just something that he said post-fight after his last fight against Justin Gaethje is something that I feel like has a good message behind it. So, and also I want to add that as I've gotten older, this idea or this philosophy, this it's just become more important to me as time has gone on. So I thought it'd be worth sharing with everybody. But something that I want to do briefly is that I want to give an overview of Khabib's career. So he was born in Dagestan, and he started training and wrestling from a very young age. From what I've seen, it was around 8 years old that he started training. And going back to that story that I mentioned that a friend of mine posted, one of the things that he's most famous for is the fact that at 9, he was made to wrestle a bear cub. Fucking crazy, man. So there's video of that, and it's out and about, and you can see it for yourself. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube or what have you. So as he grows up, he later starts training in judo and sambo. And then he eventually makes his MMA debut in 2008. So a lot of his fights happened in Russia and Europe and all that other stuff. So in the beginning, his father, who trained him in all these different martial arts and everything, he was in his corner for these fights. And during that 3-year period from 2008 to 2011, he accumulated a 16-0 undefeated record. So what ended up happening was that Khabib was signed to the UFC in late 2011, made his debut in early 2012. And his father, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, he was not able to go with Khabib when his fights were in the US because he got his visa denied. So there was a long period of time of about 7 years where all of Khabib's fights for UFC were in the US, and he had his whole team was able to come with him except for his father because he couldn't get a visa. So there was this distance that there was just this, you know, it just, he couldn't be there to support him and physically be there and all that stuff. So that kind of that kind of made a little bit of a void and all that stuff. And something that I want to make clear is that all the stuff that I'm referencing, it's from this video from this YouTuber named Patrick Gavia, and that's where I'm getting a lot of this information. It's actually a really good video piece. I would recommend checking it out. But anyway, so a little bit of we just fast forward a little bit. So eventually Khabib Nurmagomedov becomes the UFC lightweight champion. He wins that title in 2018. And then in 2019, the UFC does a show in Abu Dhabi where his father can actually attend and be in his corner for that fight. And it was you could tell it was a big moment for Khabib. You can tell that it was a significant moment for them as father-son, and Khabib won that fight. So throughout this time of him being in the UFC, he won an additional 12 more fights. So he remained undefeated at 28-0. So the year after that, in 2020, that was when the coronavirus pandemic happened. And what ended up happening was that Abdul Manap ended up getting ill and he passed away, unfortunately. And there were a lot of questions with Khabib as far as what was going to happen, if he was going to fight again or what have you. And then what eventually ends up happening is that Khabib has a fight in October of 2020. He faces off against the interim lightweight champion, Justin Gaethje, unification bout. And to make a long story short, Khabib ends up winning that fight. And then during his post-fight interview, he's saying how this is his last fight. And that he doesn't want to continue fighting without his father, and that he made the promise to his mom that, hey, this is going to be my last fight. And just for the record, it's been almost 4.5 years and he hasn't had another fight since then. So retirements are very, I don't know. Retirements from combat sports athletes is very 50-50 in that a lot of times people will retire and then they come back. Or it's just uncertain is the better term, because they'll retire, but then they'll come back eventually. But Khabib seems like the kind of guy who is going to stick to his promise and not have another fight. So in that whole post-fight speech where he's saying that he's going to retire, he then also turns his direction toward Justin Gaethje. And he says to him, he gives him his respect. He says some nice things about him, and then he says how Justin treats people around him very well. And I believe he mentioned also his parents too. And then Khabib says something along the lines of, be close with your parents, because, and also he's saying it in English is his second language, so it's kind of like broken, but basically what he's getting at is to be close with your relatives and be good to them and spend time with them, because one day they'll pass away and you never know when that'll happen, and it could be tomorrow. So just cherish their presence and their life and all that other stuff. So that is the meat and bones of this particular episode, is just that ever since I saw that back in 2020, I've always thought that's a really good message. I've always thought that's a really good words good advice, good words to heed by, whatever phrase you want to use it. It's always stuck with me. And to be honest, that's something that's only really enhanced as time has gone on. Here's an interesting thing that happened. In the lead up to that Justin Gaethje fight, what's now known as TNT Sports, back then they were known as BT Sport, they made this video, this animated short, just basically telling the story and the career of Khabib, as well as the relationship that he had with his father. And I would recommend checking it out, because what I find really good about that particular video is, if you've ever wanted a story of, if you ever wanted a good example of a story being told without any words necessary, this video would be it. It just gives you the complete picture of everything that these people have done, what they've accomplished, the circumstances, what's happening. And it does all of that without saying a single word. I think that's really amazing, and it's really a beautiful piece, in my opinion. And I remember I watched that, and even back then I thought it was a emotional piece, and it was very riveting and all that other stuff. And then a few months after that, so I'm recording this in February, and this is the 4-year anniversary of this month marks the 4-year mark that I had a relative who passed away. And I remember at one point I rewatched that TNT Sport video. And to kind of go back on what I said as far as it being riveting back when I first saw it, that is true. But then something interesting kind of happens, to the point where I watched it again at some point after my relative passed away. And I almost felt like the kind of, I guess, the way they illustrate Khabib's grief and sadness and all that stuff, I felt like I just felt like I understood that more, having gone through my own loss, and just, I guess, I just felt like I understood it more. And I guess what I was trying to say is that I identified with it a little bit more, because that was the first real significant loss of my life. So whatever kind of pain and sorrow one has when a relative does pass away, it's just that finally happened to me. So I just understood. I got it a lot more. And this kind of also goes back to my first episode, where I was talking about, I guess, the fact that you spend time with your relatives and grandparents, and just they're appreciative of whatever time that you do have, or whatever that you do spend with them. It kind of relates to that, because it's weird in a way. I kind of feel as though something like this sort of just emphasizes that even more. Just that you want to spend time with your relatives. And I think also spending time with your elder relatives is very important because, life is unpredictable. Of course, like age isn't, anyone at any age can pass away at any time. But it's kind of like the older you are, I guess the more likely something like that could happen. So a really important thing that I feel like one should live by is just the simple fact of spending time with your relatives, especially your elder relatives, because one day you're not going to be able to spend time with them or visit them anymore, and it's tough. Like I said, I'm going back to the first episode where I'm talking about how, for me personally, I want to spend time with my grandparents as much as possible, or just whatever kind of opportunity that I do get to see them, I'm going to take advantage of it because, I mean, it's a sad fact of life, but it's just, it is part of being alive to experience loss and death and all that other stuff. And I guess that's something that's very important to me, having gone through the experiences that I have, is that one day, yeah, they're not going to be around for you to visit anymore. And I think in a way, having that be the case with, I guess, grandparents, I guess that's become very important to me, just through various experiences I've had. Some that I'm sharing, and then some that, I'll choose to keep private. But this philosophy is very important to me. And I think just in general, what that sort of story demonstrates is to value and appreciate the people that we do have in our lives. Because, yeah, life is very unpredictable. So I'm seeing a lot of similarities between this episode I'm doing here and then my first one, because with regards to the relative who I had pass away a few years ago, I just wish I was able to spend more time with them. And I feel like that kind of motivates me to do what I can with the relatives who are still alive. So then that way, when the day comes that their time does, then their life does come to an end, at least I would have appreciated them as much as I could, and I never took them for granted. And I think that's really the big story behind all this, is just to never take anybody for granted, and just to enjoy their company and spend time with them as much as you can. And I'm also noticing a big theme of love in all of this, because I think this can extend to really anyone that you have some type of connection or some type of relationship with. It doesn't have to just be family members, but I'm just trying to I'm just trying to keep things focused here, I suppose. And I guess I just say, or I kind of use the example of grandparents a lot in these episodes, or just, in this episode. And then the first one is just because as I've gotten older, that's become a very important component of my life as far as maintaining some type of relationship, or just the fact that because they are, older, their time may come sooner than others. So and I think also it's because of the fact that I'll see the type of impact that, in this particular case, grandparents will have on myself or my friends or my family and all this other stuff. And I've seen it hit people really hard. And unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do about, nobody lives forever. So all we can do is just make the most of the time that we do have with them. So I just hope that's something that I really want to emphasize, because for me, my hope is that whoever may be listening to this episode is not just doesn't take that for granted, because this sort of appreciation and more focused, I guess, attempt to maintain that close relationship, that's only something that has happened as I've gotten older and wiser. But hopefully, maybe if you're watching this, you can keep this in mind to just do right from the get-go, and you really maximize the amount of time. So hopefully this is something useful, and I think that's one of the things that I really would want to emphasize in this episode. I think it's just like, the older your relatives are, and you want to do this with anybody that you love, but I think the older they are, the more important it becomes to do something like that. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. So hopefully this episode was of some value to you guys, and hopefully you took something away from that. So might be a little bit of a shorter one today, but honestly, there's not really much else I have to say about that. So love the people around you. I'll leave you with this. Love the people around you, appreciate them, and make the most of the time that you do have with them, or just, let them know that you love them. And right as I say that, I guess I think about that because I remember a friend of mine telling me, or saying something like that about a friend of mine who passed away, as far as like, just, he was trying to spread the message as far as telling people that you care about, that you love them and everything. So that's kind of why I mentioned that right now. And once again, another tie-in to a previous episode 3. But yeah, just, I'll just leave it at that. So thank you guys for your time. Thank you for listening to this. Let me know what you think about this episode and this idea in the comments section, and I'll catch you guys for another episode later. All right, have a good one.